Alright. After dying and losing the fucking world in the end, making it as far as I fucking can, or far as I have in hardcore, let's get a fucking reaction video. World War II? Oh, I thought this was World War One. Nope, World War One's over here. Alright.
14, a massive war broke out that spread across most continents and pulled in countries from all over. These days, we just call it World War I.
World War II is my favorite like war to learn about. I love learning about World War II. So much interesting shit happened. I'll watch the one that you linked, man. It's fine.
1. The countries at war ended up splitting into two sides, and after 4 long years of brutal fighting, this side won, and the other one had no choice but to sign surrender treaties. Among the losing side was a nation called Germany. After the First World War, the winning side, strangely, decided that Germany was to blame for the war, and they needed to be punished and weakened to prevent them from starting future ones. Germany was forced to sign a famous peace treaty called the Treaty of Versailles, which included many harsh terms: losing territories, paying massive reparations, shrinking its military. Most importantly, Germany was officially blamed for the war, and they totally deserved it. Now, Germany is divided and weak. It got no real way to compete with the big powers, and that's the idea. Supposedly, this new setup would make Europe a safer place. Naturally, the Germans were very upset and frustrated and felt humiliated by all of those harsh terms, especially the war guilt part. They really did not like that. But despite all the protests and complaints, and because losers do not get to make the rules, Germany had no choice but to comply. And for a few years, Germany tried to show goodwill by following the rules and sticking to the treaty. Maybe if the Allies saw Germany struggling, they would feel a little bit of sympathy and even realize the treaty was way too harsh and needed to change. Oh, look how poor I am. This was Germany's plan. So, Germany started to work its way back into the international community. It signed all kind of treaties, agreed to respect its new borders, and promised not to use war to solve problems anymore. It even joined the League of Nations. Germany kept playing along, being polite, paying the money, doing what it was told, until... In 1929, the world was hit by a massive economic crisis, what we now call the Great Depression. Now, on top of a humiliating treaty, the German economy collapsed, many were out of work, and the German currency was so worthless that it made more sense to put in the money to make a cup of tea than even trying to buy bread with it. All of this, especially the economic mess, made the Germans really hate and resent their government, which they blamed for the miserable situation they found themselves stuck in. In the middle of all of this chaos, Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party emerged on the scene. The National Socialist German Workers' Party.
I'm not gonna get demonetized for this, am I? Oh, it's good, man. Man, they got Hitler's stash pretty on point.
Or simply the Nazi Party, was a political group that really did not like the government. Hitler and the Nazis relentlessly attacked the German government and other political parties, promising the people to restore Germany to its rightful place. Hitler had several political and ideological goals, including destroying the Treaty of Versailles, making Germany self-sufficient and economically independent, expanding Germany eastward to give the German people more living space, or a Lebensraum, building a great German empire, or a Reich that would dominate the rest of Europe. And finally, the great German empire had to be racially pure. That last goal is what set Hitler and his party apart. Hitler believed in a superior race of humans. He and his crew called it the Aryan race. So, who were the Aryans exactly? Honestly, Hitler and his buddies were never really that clear about it. Generally speaking, to them, Aryans were a certain group of Europeans, mainly Germans with light skin, blonde hair, blue eyes, you know, those types. And sometimes they would slap on top other groups if it served their interests. Hitler saw Germany as the last hope for the Aryan race, and it had to be their...
It's crazy because most, like, high-ranking German commanders and, like, Hitler himself did not match that description at all.
exclusive homeland, a place to protect them from mixing with any other inferior races. So Germany had to be cleansed of other groups. For example, he did not want any Slavs, Poles, Czechs, Slovaks, and others. And more notably, the Jews. Hitler believed that the Jews had to go somehow. He also kept talking about something he called Judeo-Bolshevism, claiming that the Jews were behind communism, which he saw as a massive threat to Germany, and that they were behind the communist revolution in Russia. So yeah, Hitler hated communism, the Jews, and he hated lots of people. Anyway, in the year of 1993, after a few behind closed doors deals with the German president, Hitler made his way to power and became the Chancellor of Germany, essentially the country's de facto leader. Now that he's in charge, he can finally start chasing his goals. First thing first, wreck that stinking Treaty of Versailles. At the time, the countries that were supposed to keep Germany in line were divided and they just couldn't seem to work together. France was politically divided and struggling economically. Britain was starting.
That's how France has always been throughout history. There's always some bullshit going on in France.
To think that the treaty might have been too harsh. And America? Well, America was sound asleep in isolation and staying out of Europe. So Hitler started moving. In 1993, Hitler went ahead and pulled Germany out of the League of Nations and the Disarmament Conference. Other nations condemned, but they did not take any serious measures against him. In 1934, he saw that France was trying to form an alliance with Poland against Germany, so he moved first and signed a 10-year non-aggression pact with Poland to ruin their plans. France condemned but did not take any serious measures against him. In 1935, after finally becoming head of state, Hitler announced that he was going to build a German air force, or the Luftwaffe. Seeing that other nations just condemned but did not take any serious measures against him, he announced a week later that he was building a new German army. He even managed to convince Britain, probably France's most important ally, to let Germany rebuild parts of its navy. Then he remilitarized the region near France where they previously were not allowed to have troops. Okay. The Treaty of Versailles is now practically dead. Hitler had managed to rebuild Germany's military power, and his reputation skyrocketed in Germany and around the world. After the Treaty of Versailles, Hitler began working to fix Germany's economy. At the same time, he started planning and looking for the right chance to expand Germany and take new territories. And the opportunity was right next to him, with his neighbors and cousins, Austria. Many Austrians at the
Hitler was from Austria. Hitler wasn't even German. Hitler was Austrian. Just thought that was a little fun fact.
time had German roots and were overly excited about Germany's growing power. The Austrian government got nervous and tried reaching out to Britain, kind of like, hey, if something goes down, you'll have our back and such, right? Hitler learned about this and simply sent his troop and annexed Austria, claiming that's what the Austrian people wanted. The international community's response was basically, Hitler, no! And that was basically it. After Austria came Czechoslovakia's turn. Some of its people were of German descent, spoke German, and started calling for a return to the Reich. Hitler saw this and went, then started calling for a piece of the country called the Sudetenland. Europe at first said, Hitler, no! Okay, you can take this part only, but not an inch more. Inshallah. Hitler just annexed the rest of Czechoslovakia, and then the country was divided further. The Allies said, Hitler! After that, France and Britain were like, alright, this guy cannot be trusted and won't keep his word. If he dares to touch Poland, with whom there is a non-aggression pact, then that's it! War it is! Here Hitler did two important moves. He signed an alliance with Italy and its leader, Benito Mussolini, what's now known as the Pact of Steel. In short, it said that they were friends and would stand by each other's side. And his government met with the leadership of the Soviet Union led by Joseph Stalin, and they signed the non-aggression pact. Also, they secretly agreed that each side would take a piece of Poland for themselves. At the surface, the treaty did not make sense at all. Germans and Soviets were ideological enemies and did not like each other. But it was useful for both sides, so they struck a deal anyway. Hitler told his friend Italy, which was totally unprepared, to get ready for an invasion of Poland. And then, without any delay, in a move that changed history forever, Hitler marched his army into Poland. As a result, Britain and France declared war on Germany. And with that, the Second World War had begun.
It's because Poland's right in the middle of all the bullshit, man. Even now in Europe, like they're on the fucking front with Russia, and yet the West doesn't want to help them. So it's like they're kind of fucked. They're always stuck between a rock and a hard place.
The invasion of Poland came fast with an overwhelming force. Germany started with air raids, then quickly followed up with a huge ground attack. Tanks, vehicles, everything. The Germans did not want to get stuck in trench warfare like World War I. Their goal was simple: move fast, hit hard, never stop. Surprise the enemy, strike like lightning, and don't give them a second to breathe. This strategy later became known as Blitzkrieg, or what would you call in plain English, lightning warfare. And it is what the Germans became known for in World War II. The Poles were not weak, but they just could not withstand Germany's rapid attack. Within a week, the Germans reached the Polish capital. Soon after, the Soviet Union, following its secret deal, entered Poland from the east. And Poland was completely overrun. Each side took its share. And Britain and France, the ones meant to protect Poland, just watched, unable to do a thing. After that, Stalin, the Soviet leader who trusted absolutely no one, started getting nervous. He was worried that Finland might fall under German influence, putting Germany right on his borders, close to their major cities like Leningrad. So Stalin basically told Finland, "Hey, hand over some land or I swear!" And the Finns were like, "No!" So Stalin sent his forces and took parts of Finland. And then he went on to occupy the Baltic states and took a chunk of Romania. On the other side, Germany suspected that Britain and France were planning to take Norway so it wouldn't fall into German hands. So Hitler ordered his army to take Denmark. And Norway too. The British and the French sent few forces to stop him, but they got clapped quickly and Germany took both countries. Now Hitler was secured from the north, the south, the east. Only one direction left for him to dominate Europe: the west. Now it was France and Britain's turn, Germany's first enemies from the First World War. Everything before this was just child's play. The real war was about to begin. Germany started preparing for a massive attack, and the French and British, knowing that the fight was coming straight at them, began getting ready as well. France, although not in the best shape, still had one of the strongest and largest armies in the world. Add the British forces and you get a power you really should not underestimate. The German army, over 3 million soldiers. France, together with the British forces supporting them, over 3 million as well.
German military technology was so fucking advanced for its time. They made like all the fucking first machine guns, all the best actual like fast tanks. Like, there's a reason the Blitzkrieg worked so well, and that's because, like, their technology was just so much better than other nations. It's honestly crazy. Hitler kind of fucked himself with going to war with so many different people at one time.
Well, on paper, the two sides looked evenly matched. France had its borders with Germany heavily fortified. They had a whole line of defenses called the Maginot Line. The Germans were not dumb, they wouldn't try to breach it. So France, along with the British, expected Germany to take Belgium, that small country between them, and move their troops through it, just like they did in World War I. So they mobilized their forces at Belgium in anticipation. One thing we need to mention here. Right along the French borders, there is a huge forest called the Ardennes. France did not bother fortifying it because the German army relied on tanks. And tanks can't go through dense forests, right? Oh well, no need to fortify it. Foreshadowing. The British and the French gathered most of their troops near Belgium, setting up their defenses and getting ready to face the Germans there. And it looked like they were right. The Germans did go into Belgium. Then something odd happened. The Germans also moved into the Netherlands. Why are they splitting their forces? That alone threw the Allies off and made them pretty nervous. But then came the big surprise. Unlike what the French expected, the Germans did not attack Belgium alone. They split their forces and attacked Belgium and the Netherlands. But the largest part of the army pushed through the Ardennes forest. They came out behind the French lines, surrounded them and cut off all supplies. The French and the British were trapped. The Germans were hitting them from all directions. Their lines fell apart and everyone started retreating north. The British forces kept pulling back until they were finally cornered in a place called Dunkirk. For some reason, the German forces halted their advance and only bombarded them from the air. The British saw this as their chance to escape and quickly, they loaded every soldier they could onto ships and sent them back to Britain. And left the French alone. The Germans kept pushing the French and advancing towards Paris. And in a very short time, they reached the capital. And France declared its surrender. It was a sweeping victory for the Germans. France, the same country Germany fought for 4 long years in the First War, collapsed in just 35 days. Even Hitler himself did not expect this quick win. So he rushed to Paris and took few photos. Germany set up a new pro-German government in France and took over parts of the country. And after that, Paris pretty much became a playground for the Germans. At this moment, Hitler was the dominant in Europe. Oh, right. Italy under Mussolini declared war on France and tried to send troops into southern France after Dunkirk. But their rear was kicked and couldn't do much. By the way, the Germany-Italy alliance became known as the Axis powers and their enemies were the Allies. So these are the factions that fought in World War II. Anyway, let's continue. Britain, now alone without any allies, knew a German invasion was coming. Their forces still haven't recovered from fighting the Germans, and they left a lot of their equipment behind in France when they escaped. So things were not great, but they had a card up their sleeve that might help them win. Britain is an island in the middle of the sea. You can't roll tanks into it like you did in France.
Mussolini, that motherfucker was just along for the ride. He just hated communists, so he was like, Hitler, I got you. But that motherfucker struggled to take on the African front so bad. Like, he struggled to take Ethiopia. You guys are Italy, a major world power, and y'all struggled with the Ethiopia.
France, they have a natural barrier protecting them called the English Channel. Germany lacked a good way to carry an invasion across the channel. So, Britain had a chance. The Germans thought, if you can't attack them from the land or the sea, then your only option is to attack them from the air. And that's what happened. Both sides fought in the air for control over the British skies. The German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, versus the British Royal Air Force, the RAF. They started with light air skirmishes, during which Hitler tried to negotiate for peace, while bombing them, of course. Then came a massive air battle, and Britain proved it wasn't easy to break, and managed to push back the German attacks. The Germans got fed up and decided to bomb London, and the British bombed Berlin too. Hitler realized that he won't be able to control British skies or wipe out their air force, so he decided to postpone the invasion. But of course, the bombing didn't stop. And Britain won? They held off Germany's assault, so they won. For the first time, Hitler failed in a military operation. Defeating the Germans is possible. After failing to invade Britain, Hitler turned his head east toward the Soviet Union.
This was his biggest mistake. This literally cost him the entire war.
But before we dive into Russia, let's take a look at Italy and see what it was up to at this point of the war. Italy was on the winning side at the end of World War I. Its allies had promised it some territories after the war, but as colonizers usually do, they ditched Italy and gave it nothing. The Italians were furious with the Allies, and out of this anger emerged Mussolini, Italy's leader and Hitler's buddy who loved to take off his shirt. Mussolini wanted to bring back Italy's old glory and rebuild the Roman Empire. Yes, that Roman Empire. After watching his buddy Hitler win battle after battle and grab everything in sight, Mussolini felt he had to move fast before there was nothing left for him and started taking action. Now, let's look at a map of the lands the Romans once ruled. See all of these areas? North Africa, parts of Greece. Mussolini simply wanted them. Back then, North Africa was under European rule. Britain controlled Egypt, Italy held Libya, and France ruled Tunisia, Algeria, and most of Morocco. The rest of Africa was split up among the European powers. Mussolini began with a few small skirmishes against British forces, first in Malta and then again in East Africa. But his first real battle came when Italy launched an invasion of British Somaliland and actually managed to defeat the British there. Okay, before we continue, there is something you need to know about Mussolini. He often acted on his own, without coordinating with Hitler. He launched a campaign against Egypt on his own to take it from the British, but it went so bad that the British pushed him back and took part of his Libyan territory and captured a huge number of his soldiers. Overall, the Mediterranean was not that important to Hitler. But since his buddy was getting slapped around there, he had to send one of his best generals, along with loads of tanks, to North Africa to bail Italy out. And then, of course, Mussolini decided that he wanted Greece too, so he sent his troops in without asking Hitler. And he got slapped there too. Consult. Hitler was furious. And after securing alliances with Hungary, Romania, and Slovakia to protect his southern borders, he decided to let Mussolini and the Italians take their beatings in Greece for a bit. After a while, Hitler sent his forces there, but only after persuading Bulgaria to join the Axis and invading Yugoslavia to clear a path. And he defeated the British-backed Greek forces and ended up rescuing the Italians. After that, the Germans and the British fought on an island called Crete, and the Germans won. Okay, we covered Italy. Let's go back to Germany. After the failed invasion of Britain in the West, Hitler decided it was time to go after his main goal: to crush the Soviet Union and communism in the East, and to create a new homeland for the Germans. From the very start, if you remember, Hitler's ideological enemy has always been the Soviet Union. Communism, or what he called Judeo-Bolshevism. The non-aggression pact between them did not matter. Hitler will destroy them. The Germans began preparing for the biggest military operation in history, an operation known as Barbarossa. Even though Russia was far larger than Germany in land and in army size, Hitler
Dude, that's the thing. Russia does the same method in every single war. They do it now in the Russian-Ukraine war. They don't have the best technology. They don't have the best strategy. They don't have the best tactics. But they have millions upon millions upon millions of soldiers who will throw their fucking life for Russia, or the Soviet Union in this case. So, yeah, it's just straight brute force. Oh, you killed 5 million of us? Okay, here's another 15 million that we're about to just throw at you. And, oh, you think that you can fight in the cold like us? Alright, try it, and then when you guys are starving out, we're gonna throw another 20 million fucking troops at you guys. So, it's literally just an undefeated method because they have so many fucking people that they'll just throw. They'll just toss them into the fire. And it just, bogs down every other army.
All expected a quick, easy victory.
They just throw troops until you have no more left.
Backward and poorly equipped. He thought, just kick in the front door and the whole rotten structure will collapse. The Germans split their forces into 3 army groups and unleashed them on Russia. The attack caught the Soviets off guard. They were not ready for it. In the first 24 hours alone, the Germans caused tens of thousands of casualties, captured massive numbers of prisoners, and advanced at a speed even they did not expect. Because the Soviets were ideological enemies, not just military ones, the Germans treated them with extreme brutality. In the first 2 months, they committed things that are difficult to talk about. The Germans kept pushing deeper into Russia and captured huge areas. But even with all the victories, they soon began to run into major problems. First issue: Russia is massive and has a harsh weather. The deeper they advanced, the harder it was to supply their troops. Second issue:
mind you, these guys was fucking hooked up on meth and ice the whole time. They was on straight fucking opioids and meth the whole fucking war. Hitler had them motherfuckers running 20 miles just doped up on meth. So no wonder they didn't need to sleep for a fucking week.
Despite being chaotic, poorly organized, and taking massive losses, the Soviets still managed to hit back hard and wear the Germans down. As the Germans moved forward, Soviet units that hadn't been captured regrouped and formed resistance groups, or partisans, who attacked from behind. These partisans became a non-stop headache for the Germans and harassed them constantly. The Soviets also adopted a scorched earth policy. In short, they destroyed anything useful if they had to retreat. Roads, bridges, buildings, fields. Chipotle. One of the most astonishing things in the war was how the Soviets dismantled their factories in the West, piece by piece, bolt by bolt. And from there, they built entirely new industrial cities to support their war effort. It was a massive undertaking, something the Germans never expected. So, because all of this, Germany's advance kept stalling. The Russians were tougher than expected, and the war looked like it would drag on. Something the Germans really did not want. By September, the Germans had finally reached Kiev in Ukraine and the city of Leningrad. They managed to take Kiev, but Leningrad was put under siege. A siege that lasted nearly 900 days, which will claim the lives of more than 1 million people. Many of them through hunger and starvation. By late September, the Central Army pushed toward Moscow, but the Russian autumn did not help them at all. Rain and mud, non-stop. Their vehicles could barely move. Add to that the Soviet defenses. They kept pushing and pushing until winter arrived. Now you are in Russia, in the cold. In Russia, the German soldiers were not prepared for this weather at all. Wallah, they thought it was going to be a quick victory, so they didn't even bring proper jackets. The Russians, on the other hand, this was their weather. They were used to it. They brought in troops from Serbia that are expert in winter fighting. And in December, they launched a counterattack near Moscow and stopped the German advance. And under these conditions, the Germans could not do much. They had to halt their operations in Russia until spring, when the weather warmed up a bit. That's what Hitler really wanted to avoid. Germany had always relied on fast blitzkrieg attacks to overwhelm their enemies. And most, they collapsed quickly. But the Russians held on, despite Germany's heavy blows. And now, the conflict between the Germans and the Soviets was turning into a long, costly war of attrition. And Germany was not ready for that. If you have noticed, there is a sleeping giant that we have not talked about since the start of the war. Japan. Japan came out of World War I as a winner after snatching up few nearby islands from Germany. And after the war, it was handed those islands plus few areas in China. But the West asks Japan to limit the size of its navy so there wouldn't be constant conflict in that part of the Pacific. Many in Japan were upset by what they perceived as Western arrogance, and they became convinced that the only path to national security was in getting stronger. In general, Japan was dealing with lots of problems at the time. The population was booming, the country lacked natural resources, and many people had lost faith in the civilian government, seeing it as incompetent and corrupt. So many in Japan's military became convinced that the only real solution to Japan's growing problems was expansion, to grab new lands filled with food, oil, minerals, all the good stuff you need to build a strong military. So, where could they find a land like that? Right to their west was a region in China rich with resources called Manchuria. So after a small incident, definitely not staged, Japan zipped in with its army and took over the area and established a new state over there called Manchukuo. The League of Nations said, Japan, no! But Japan ignored them and quit the league and so on. It went to China and took a huge chunks of it and so on and committed not very nice things in the capital, Nanjing. And
yeah, Nanjing, when he says not very nice things, it's literally called the rape of Nanjing. These motherfuckers did some of the worst experiments on Chinese people. Like most of like the medical shit that we know today, we got from Japan's crazy ass experiments that they did on Chinese people. Like that's how we know how much water's in the human body. Because they did some fucking torturous ass tactics. Like just dehydrating Chinese people, fucking making them drink water nonstop, fucking testing body parts, flame versus freeze. Like, man, they did some horrible shit to Chinese people, man.
So on. And for a while, she kept harassing China and pushing deeper to expand and secure resources. Despite condemnations from the US, Japan tried to expand northward, but the Soviets told them, okay, so Japan can't push north because there's a Soviet giant that bites in the way, so south? Down south, America had a chokehold on that part of the Pacific. Any move there meant Japan would have been on a collision course with the US and its friends. So Japan decided to cool it for a bit and focus on building up its own strength and influence with peaceful means. Then this mustache guy popped up in Germany and so on, and Japan watched him slap the West around and so on, and they thought, hey, we can do that too, and so on. Japan replaced its government with a more aggressive one, and the new government started taking even more of China. They also made a deal with Germany and Italy. If any of them went to war with the US, the others would help. And with that, the famous Axis powers alliance of the Second World War was complete. When America saw Japan doing all of these things, they hit them with economic sanctions, cutting their oil and other supplies. After that, America even froze Japan's money in US banks. Japan was now crippled without resources. They got mad, screamed, protested, but there wasn't much they could do to change the West's position. They wanted them out of China. To continue its expansionist project, maybe violence was their only option. And that's what happened. In November 1941, Japan quietly sent a huge carrier towards an American base in Hawaii called Pearl Harbor, and
like the next like long stream, I'm gonna get ad block.
it destroyed a significant chunk of the US Pacific Fleet. Now they had some time to do what they wanted and expand freely, while America scrambled to rebuild its presence in the Pacific. Unsurprisingly, the Americans were furious and immediately declared war on Japan. With that, both US and Japan were part of World War II. Hitler declared war on the US since he signed a pact with Japan, if you remember. The war now shifted from a European conflict into a true world war. Japan wanted to grab whatever it could while it still had the chance, so they went around the Pacific and steamrolled everything in their path. They seized a lot of land. At this point, Japan was the undisputed powerhouse of Southeast Asia, and now the sea was wide open for them. What should they do next? While Japan was thinking about its next move, suddenly the United States shocked Japan by bombing Tokyo. The US wanted to show Japan, don't get cocky with few wins. We can hit you at home if we wanted. That strike on Tokyo was a slap that brought Japan back to reality and pushed them into a more defensive stance. Before expanding further, they had to push the US out. Here, they entered their first real battle with America. In a place called the Coral Sea, the Japanese fleet wanted to expand its control and cut the supply line between Australia and the US, which brought them head-to-head with the American fleet. This clash sparked a battle unlike anything seen before. A battle in the middle of the sea, but the fighting was done with aircraft and their carriers. Both sides claimed victory, but strategically the US won since they stopped Japan from taking any more territories. Japan said, Japan could not move freely with America lurking around. They had to force the US out of the Pacific by any means. So once again, they put together a massive naval fleet. And with a complicated plan we don't have the time to get into, they headed toward an island called Midway, where the Americans had a base. And there, the two strongest fleets in the world clashed again. The battle was fast and chaotic, with planes swarming like bees in the skies, and ships and carriers dodging around like something out of a movie or a fantasy. No, seriously! Just look how the Japanese carriers were maneuvering to avoid bombs. The battle concluded with a divisive victory for the US. America succeeded in sinking 4 Japanese carriers. The Battle of Midway was a devastating defeat for Japan. From that point on, it was no longer the dominant power in the Pacific and was forced to shift from offense to defense. Near Australia and the Solomon Islands, Japanese and American forces became locked in a long, drawn-out battle known as the Battle of Guadalcanal. The Americans eventually won, but it wasn't easy. During this time, the US began a secret project called the Manhattan Project, aiming to develop a new weapon powered by the energy inside the atom.
Yeah, I could never be like in the Navy or anything like that, motherfucker. Fuck fighting in the water.
Meanwhile, in North Africa, the forces Hitler sent to save Italy managed to drive the British out of Libya, except for a city called Tobruk. And the two armies remained stuck on the Egyptian borders, fighting over the same ground again and again. Sometimes the Allies won, sometimes the Axis did. But Hitler kept refusing to send real reinforcements because the region was a sideshow to him. Mussolini dragged him into it. In the east, in Iraq, a pro-German coup erupted, throwing Britain into disarray and forcing them to divert some troops to intervene. In Syria, the British and the Free French forces fought against the French army loyal to the Vichy government, which supported Germany. Britain managed to find a way to resupply its forces in Egypt, and there they managed to defeat the Germans in a major battle called El Alamein, pushing them back and forcing them to retreat deep into Libya. Here, the Allied forces started discussing their next move. The Soviet Union, now an ally, was basically saying, "Guys, Hitler is killing us here. Can someone please open another front in Europe to ease the pressure? And Africa doesn't count." The Americans agreed and said to Britain, "Why don't we attack them through the English Channel, right next to you?" Britain replied, "No." "Why not?" America asked. Britain replied, "Because I said so. Plus, we're not ready. Plus, the waters are crawling with German U-boats. Plus, your troops are not ready to face the Germans. Plus, I don't wanna." After some back and forth, the Allies agreed to delay the attack on Germany through the English Channel and instead strike from French North Africa, or the Maghreb countries. West Africa do not count! And they launched a massive joint attack there. The Americans finally had a chance to test themselves against Hitler and...
Hey, Meta. Play gorgeous.
Hey, Doja, cool bike.
Thank you.
Car takes a quarter?
It's a rental. Aldi doesn't pay for cart wranglers.
Told you, you're not ready for the Germans. The Axis forces clapped them, especially in Tunisia. But after that, the Allies regrouped, and since Hitler refused to send proper supplies to his African corps, they managed to launch a second attack and surround the Germans and Italians near Tunis. Now in North Africa, the Axis was kicked out of the east and was being chased there, cornered in the west, and many of their forces were captured there, and they just lost control. There. And just like that, the Allies cemented their dominance in North Africa. And the North African campaign came to a close. Alright, Africa's done. Can we finally invade Germany through the English Channel? Not yet. Let's knock out Italy first. Look, our troops are already close and Italy is weak right now. It's an easy win. No, but... Okay, you got a point. Now, the Allies set their sights on Italy. The attack began on the island of Sicily, and the Italians barely put up a fight, and huge numbers of them were surrendering in bulk. Nobody wanted to risk their life for Mussolini. The Germans there, on the other hand, dug in fiercely. But the Allies quickly took control of Sicily, losing Sicily and the possibility...
Bro, Mussolini is just like... He was just such a bad fucking war leader.
Of an invasion of Italy itself led to something unexpected. Mussolini, Hitler's main ally and source of inspiration, was removed from power and replaced by a new government which immediately announced its surrender. Italy surrendered in September 1943, but the Germans were still there and they had no intention of giving up Rome. So they sent more troops into northern Italy, set up a new puppet government, and put Mussolini back in charge as a symbolic leader. The Allies split their forces and tried entering Italy from several directions, and after long, brutal fighting in miserable conditions, especially for the Americans, the Allies finally managed to take southern Italy and reach the outskirts of Rome by late 1943. After that, everything kinda stalled, neither side could push forward, and things in Italy settled into kind of an easy stalemate. Still, the campaign against the Germans in Italy continued. The Allies fought several battles here and there until they reached Rome. The Germans pulled back north, partly because they did not want a major symbol of Western civilization like Rome to be destroyed. And there, they fortified themselves.
Yeah, no, America really didn't want shit to do with Germany like that. I mean, until they fucking destroyed our ship, we really didn't want nothing to do with them. And, I mean, if it wasn't for that pact that they had with fucking Japan, I don't think America would have ever helped in Europe.
Along a second defensive line known as the Gothic Line. Let's rewind a bit. On the Eastern Front over in Russia, if you remember, the Germans were trying to take two cities, Moscow and Leningrad. But it just wasn't working. The Soviets were exhausted, the Germans were exhausted, Operation Barbarossa was a failure. Hitler was like, dang it! Boys, listen up! We're changing strategy. Instead of these two dumb cities, which we don't even need, we'll launch a new operation that actually benefits us. We'll send part of our army into southern Russia. Down there in the Caucasus, there are oil fields we can use. Also, we'll take a city there called Stalingrad. Stalingrad was an industrial city that produced many tanks and weapons for the Soviets. And it sat on one of Europe's largest rivers, a key route for moving supplies. Taking it would cripple Soviet industry and cut off a major supply route. And besides, what was the city's name again? Stalingrad? 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 No joke, one of the reasons the Germans wanted the city was because it had Stalin in its name. They thought taking it would be a huge insult and a psychological blow to the Soviets. Hitler split his forces and pushed them south. And despite Soviet attempts to stop them, the Germans reached the city. And right there, one of the most brutal battles in human history began. The Battle of Stalingrad. The Germans would take the city at any cost, and the Soviets would defend it to the last. It started with a bombardment and a full siege. Then it turned into a close combat. Combat shifted from the streets to alleys to inside the buildings. The city was reduced to rubble, and inside that rubble, the fighting continued. Soldiers fought and killed over a few meters. Snipers were hiding in every corner. Among all the battles in World War II, no battle claimed more lives than Stalingrad. At first, the Germans controlled nearly 90% of the city, and it looked like victory was theirs. But in one of the largest counteroffensives of the war, the Soviets sent massive reinforcements and managed to encircle the Germans inside the city. After weeks of siege and starvation, the Germans wanted to surrender, but Hitler ordered them to fight to the last man. They remained trapped for months in brutal Russian winter without supplies, until they finally surrendered in February. It was a victory for the Soviets and a crushing defeat for Germany. From that point on, the scales began to tip in Russia. The Germans suffered defeat after another, until the Soviets drove them back from most of their territory. Around the time the Battle of Stalingrad was raging, the Allies met in Tehran, and the Soviets basically told Britain and America, listen, no more excuses. Open a second front in Germany or I swear... Stalin had had enough. Roosevelt had had enough. Both of them wanted an invasion of Germany through the English Channel. Britain finally said, all right, fine. Yes! And preparations began for the operation meant to end Germany. Operation Overlord. By June of 1944, everyone was on edge waiting for the Allied invasion. The Germans knew an attack was coming from the sea. They just did not know when or where. They knew one thing for sure. If they failed to stop it, the future of the Third Reich was uncertain. And on June 6th, off the coast of France in a place called Normandy, German soldiers spotted something in the English Channel. The scale of the attack was unbelievable. For weeks on end, ships after ships, plane after plane, non-stop. Over 2 million soldiers from more than 12 countries landed with their equipment on the beaches of Normandy, all of them heading into France to fight the Germans and their allies. The German defenses fought back fiercely and wiped out huge numbers of troops, but numbers prevailed. The Allies managed to secure the beaches and establish their landing zones. The Allies had finally returned to mainland Europe, and Germany was in serious trouble. Now it was fighting on 3 fronts: in the west, in the east, and in the south and Italy. The Allies pushed in from the west while the Soviets advanced from the east. Despite German resistance, which was falling apart from every direction, the Soviets scored major victories in the east. Meanwhile, Britain and the United States liberated northwest France and retook Paris. And they didn't stop there. They kept moving into Belgium and Luxembourg. The Allies kept pushing forward in the west, but they ran into serious supply problems. The same issue that plagued pretty much every army in World War II. They also tried to launch a major operation to end the war, but the Germans stopped it. Despite stopping a major Allied operation, Germany was still in serious trouble. The country was now surrounded on all sides, losing ground everywhere. Hitler's main enemy has always been the Soviet Union.
Yeah, the Swiss in every war in literally all of world history have just... Hey man, we're chilling. We got chocolate. You guys can ski here. You know what? We're just gonna watch.
Not anyone else. But to focus on them, he had to deal with Britain and the United States. If he can't defeat them outright, he can at least force them to the negotiating table. All he needed was a massive blow, strong enough to make them say, ouch, 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 ouch. Okay, stop. Okay, let's talk. Remember the move Germany pulled at the start of the war against France, where they pushed through the impassable forest? Hitler decided to gamble on the same move again. He planned to strike the Allies from the one place they wouldn't expect, split their forces and seize a major port in Belgium. His officers protested. Many of them did. An attack like this would not work anymore. But Hitler was desperate. And in December 1944, with skies hidden by the clouds and snow covering the ground, Hitler gathered everything he had left and ordered a surprise attack on the Americans, launching a secret attack through the Ardennes, later known as the Battle of the Bulge. The German army smashed through the American lines and punched a hole through them. And at first the Germans had the upper hand, but that was the end for the German offensive. The Allies held the line and pushed them back. Hitler ignored his officers' warnings and wasted the very last of his resources on a failed gamble. His reckless choices ended any hope of winning the war. Now, Germany could no longer fight, neither east nor west. The Soviets were ready to push into Poland, and Hitler had nothing left to stop them. But before we continue with Hitler, let's rewind a bit and check in on Japan. Last time, we were at a battle between the US and Japan on an island called Guadalcanal, which ended in an American victory. After that, while the Allies and Axis powers were fighting across Europe and Africa, the US and Japan were locked in a series of battles for control of islands across the Pacific. Which islands? See all these tiny dots? The US and Japan fought viciously over them, and for a good reason, kinda. Here's America, and here's Japan. Between them, a massive ocean called the Pacific. If one of them wanted to strike the other, they had to travel a long way by ship to get there. And aircrafts back then, they just could not make it. Wasn't practical to attack them directly. Nah, better option was to control islands across the Pacific, using them as launch points for your forces. Besides, holding the islands kept your merchant ships safe. At first, Japan controlled many of these islands. But once the US secured Guadalcanal, rationale, they launched a new strategy, hopping from island to island, with the goal of taking control of that part of the Pacific and slowly carving away toward Japan itself. America on the offensive, Japan on the defensive. The US kept pushing forward, fighting Japan across island after island. And honestly, they won most of these battles. Japan kept losing and losing and losing, and every time the Americans landed on a new island, a massive battle would erupt. Over a tiny piece of land you can barely see on a map, and maybe only few birds live there. When the Americans moved in to take the Mariana Islands, they clashed with Japan in a massive battle near the Philippine Sea. And Japan got absolutely wrecked. A huge portion of what was left of the Japanese fleet and carriers was destroyed, and they lost over 500 planes. The US kept island hopping and pushing forward until it reached the point where it could launch air attacks directly on Japan itself. Japan government collapsed and a new one took its place. Now, Japan was in a very dangerous position. The Americans were closing in fast, and what was left of Japan's navy was barely standing. They had to find a way to turn things around, or at least score a major victory. The Allies moved to retake the Philippines, and Japan could not afford to lose them. So they gathered whatever was left of their fleet and threw it into a suicidal battle against the US at Leyte Gulf in the largest naval battle of World War II. The American fleet was far bigger, and Japan went to battle without proper support from their carriers. But this time, Japan had a secret weapon. In that battle, driven by sheer desperation, the Japanese began using one of the strangest and most infamous tactics of the war: kamikaze suicide attacks. Japanese pilots flew their planes directly into American ships, turning the aircrafts themselves into weapons. The psychological impact was huge. It convinced many Americans that the Japanese were fanatical and were willing to do anything. But despite these strange attacks, the Japanese, unsurprisingly, were defeated. The Japanese Navy broke its back. After this battle, it played no real role for the rest of the war. The US, backed by Australia and Mexico, continued its push in the Philippines. And they kept moving forward, and now it was very close to Japan's mainland. Here, America wanted to take 2 more islands to gain even more launch points for air attacks on Japan: the islands of Ojima and Okinawa. And the Japanese fought ferociously. The battle for these 2 islands were absolutely fierce. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers were killed, most of them Japanese. Japan was beaten, and it had nothing left to stop the Americans except its own people. And it was ready to sacrifice everything just to keep the Americans off its homeland. After this battle, the US began to realize that a full invasion of mainland Japan would be a disaster. Their estimates: they could lose up to 1 million soldiers, and who knows how many millions of Japanese would die along the way. America knew it would eventually win, but it didn't want to pay that kind of price for victory. Is there a way to force Japan to surrender with fewer losses? Here, the US began a new strategy. They started launching aircrafts from China and the islands they captured, and began bombing Japan and destroying it. Back to Germany. By February 1945, Soviet forces pushed deep into Eastern Europe and were just 65 miles from Berlin, Germany's capital. From the other side, the Allies had crossed the Rhine on Germany's western border, and by April, they were at the gates of the capital as well. During the Soviet advance in the east, they uncovered one of the most horrifying discoveries of the entire Second World War. Throughout this period, Germany and its allies built camps across their territory and across many regions they controlled. There, prisoners were gathered along with many people who belonged to groups the Nazi Party disliked and over whom it held now power: Russians, Poles, Serbs, Roma, people with disabilities, anyone labeled an enemy, and of course, Jews. Inside these camps, many were forced into labor to serve the Nazi regime. And beyond that, the regime pursued a final solution for dealing with these groups. In the camps, millions were systematically eliminated. An estimated 17 million people died through execution, exhaustion, or the brutal conditions they were forced to endure. Now, the Allied forces are at Germany's capital, Berlin. Months earlier, the Big Three, Britain, America, and the Soviet Union, have agreed to leave Berlin to the Soviets. They would take the city. After Hitler spent years trying to destroy them, after killing millions of their people, now they would fire the final shot, the one that would end his Reich. The Soviets launched their final assault with a storm of fire on the German defenses around Berlin. Then they sent their armies to take the city. Once Berlin was encircled, they crushed the city and its remaining resistance. At this point, one question was on the mind of the Americans and the British. Where is Hitler? Is he hiding somewhere inside Berlin? Or has he escaped the city? Intelligence suggested that the Germans built a stronghold in the Alps. So maybe he was hiding there. So the Allies sent most of their forces south toward Bavaria to search for him. But they wouldn't find him there. Hitler was still in Berlin under the bombardment.
Nah, man, I'm not ending the stream when I'm this close.
Hitler was
Over
hiding in
halfway.
a bunker beneath the city, fully aware that the war was over for him and his party. Not long before that, his friend Mussolini had been captured while trying to flee northern Italy, after repeated Allied attacks and uprisings against him. And he was executed, and his body was publicly displayed on the streets of
Damn,
Milan,
they did Mussolini
determined
like
not to
that.
meet the same fate. Hitler decided that he would neither run nor surrender to the Allies. On April 30th, 1945, Hitler took his own life. And he ordered his followers to burn his body so it wouldn't be desecrated the way Mussolini had been. On May 8th, victory over Germany was officially declared, and a few weeks later, what remained of Hitler's body was discovered. And with that, World War II came to an end. At least in Europe. After Germany's defeat, there was one major thing left for the Allies to deal with: Japan. Despite repeated defeats, despite the heavy bombing, despite the destruction of its navy, Japan still refused to surrender. The US, after all the earlier island battles, wanted to avoid a ground invasion. They wanted to end the war quickly with minimal losses, but also didn't want to negotiate. Britain and the US demanded unconditional surrender. America issued an ultimatum: we'll let you keep your land, we'll let you rebuild your industry, and we have no intention of enslaving you or wiping you out as a nation, as long as you withdraw from all occupied territories, disarm completely, and surrender without conditions. Either accept this or prepare to face a total and complete destruction. Japan did not accept.
Big ass mushroom.
On the morning of August 6th, 1945, an atomic bomb was dropped on the city of Hiroshima. The bomb alone obliterated 60% of the city, killing between 80,000 and 100,000 people. Did we not warn you we can destroy you? You want Japan erased from existence? That's what you want? We've got a stockpile of these weapons. The US dropped a second atomic bomb on Nagasaki, sending Japan an unmistakable message. We possess the most devastating weapon on Earth, and we're not afraid to use it. As a final blow, the Soviet Union also declared war on Japan. At first, Japan still refused to surrender even after Nagasaki, but numbers prevailed. Japan at the end, surrounded on all sides, finally on August 15, announced its surrender. And with that, the war finally ended. World War II was the largest human conflict in history. 55 million people lost their
Holy
lives. As a result,
shit,
no place on
55
Earth
mil?
escaped its impact, even regions untouched by direct fighting. The war reshaped global power dynamics. In its aftermath, the United Nations was founded to prevent future world wars. The United States and the Soviet Union emerged as superpowers, setting the stage for the Cold War. Europe, at least for a while, was divided. And after the war, decolonization movement surged, and the modern nation-state model spread across the world. It was a total war. It was a costly war. It was, in every sense of the word, a world war. And that's its story summarized.
Damn. Good fucking video. That was a good video. I thought I knew a lot about World War II. A lot of that was shit that I knew, but yeah, there was some good bits in there.